Becoming UnDone is a podcast for those who dare bravely, risk mightily, and grow relentlessly. Join me, Toby Brooks, as I invite a new guest each week where we can examine how high achievers can transform from falling apart to falling into place. And if you've been following along for the past, I guess we're on 9 episodes deep, we've been taking a deep dive on the life, the lessons, and the legacy of the late Coach Dick Tomey. Joining me today is a mentor, a friend, now team sport manager for Gatorade and Gatorade Sports Marketing, Magie Lacambra. Maggie, thank you so much for joining me.
Toby, it is a sincere pleasure and an honor to be here with you today, and just feel like it's a pretty nice thing to be able to talk about Coach Tomey. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I will go ahead and plant this seed. I tapped you it was part of my MBA. I had you interview for a real brief kind of 4-parter with some other folks, and you were gracious enough to do that. Now you're tapping in for this. I really want to hear your specific story. So I'm going to go ahead and plant that seed and say, we're going to circle back and we're going to hear your story on Becoming UnDone. But today the focus is on Dick Tomey. So Tell me about how you first met Coach at Arizona, maybe some of your background that led you to Tucson when you were at, as you famously said, that other institution.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting that I was at Arizona State. I did go to grad school at ASU, and then I was hired full-time in the athletic department. So I was on the opposite side of the field of Coach Tomey without knowing anything about him for a little bit. Although I was not the football athletic trainer at ASU, but, worked games to assist. So when I came to the U of A in 94, Sue Hillman had hired me to work women's basketball, and went through the basketball season. I, did not meet Coach Tomey until there. And, I think as you may recall, Coach Tomey liked to roam McHale Center, and he roamed around a lot, and sometimes looking for things to eat or snacks or what have you, but he would roam through the training room. And that's how I met him. First time was him roaming through the training room. And when I first came in August, I believe it was, because it was right before training camp was starting. So that was the first time. And it was just as a passing by, hey, this is our new staff member, going to work women's basketball. And he was a champion of everybody in that building. So he was very, very warm at that time. Then my probably next or most official time meeting him was during spring of, it would have been of spring of 95, because I started in 94 there. And Sue called me in her office and said, hey, it's spring football is about to start. She had some things going on, some projects, and wanted to know if I could cover spring football for her while she stayed inside. So I thought, that's interesting. But heck, I'll do it. Right. Absolutely. Any opportunity. And she was a leader, so I didn't question that. So then I got reintroduced to Coach Tomey, and he knew who I was already, and started working at spring football. And I thought that was it. It was going to be spring football. And I go back and work women's basketball. And at the time, women's soccer, actually, too. I was supervising women's soccer because it was a club sport that was going to become an intercollegiate sport. And that spring football coverage turned into a full-time gig afterwards, when Sue let us know that she was going to be going to KCOM in Phoenix back then. What is now AT still now was Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine. So yeah, that's how it started.
That's incredible. I mean, the thought of going there, and certainly nothing wrong with women's basketball. There's still not, but football, especially in that era, was the marquee assignment for an athletic trainer. And typically you had years of experience and a deep network. And we'll kind of get into the fact that a woman working Division I football in 1994 was few and far between. Those are true groundbreaking pioneers in the area. And Sue certainly deserves a ton of credit for it. And I've got her on my list to interview, but she's still doing it. She is with the UFL's Pittsburgh franchise, and I didn't get to her in time. She said, I'm in season, maybe circle back to me. But knowing that you went there to cover women's basketball, and then you had a leader who was secure enough to allow you to fill in her stead, no worries about, you coming in and stealing thunder, but also just the fact that a woman in that position at that time was allowed to do that. How did that really resonate with you. What were your initial thoughts and reactions to being in that space, in that place at that time?
My initial reaction was, "Are you really serious about this?" Because again, I'm a newbie, right? I'm the new staff member there, and I had such and still have such respect for Sue as, yes, a pioneer in what she was doing, not just in athletic training, but man, her. I think Sue has forgotten more anatomy than I've ever known in my life, just because
Same.
she's so good at that. And so the bar, like, how can I meet that bar that she has set? But she instilled confidence in me, and that she's a leader. She's breaking ground in this area of a very male dominant setting. Um, and also Coach Tomey. I mean, I give them both huge props, right? Because me working football there would not have happened without Sue and Coach Tomey's blessing and support. So both of them equally very, I think, open-minded into just putting the right person in the right place to do a good job. And so that's what I felt. And Sue's confidence to put me into that position, and then Coach Tomey's confidence in having me join his team based off of Sue's recommendation was an unbelievable boost of confidence. But still, mind you, I was still terrified. I'm like, I better live up to this expectation. But yeah, there weren't too many back in the day doing that. And the fact that Coach Tomey, obviously Sue set the groundwork and opened the doors, and then Coach Tomey just kept those doors open. And when he introduced me to the team, this is Maggie, our new athletic trainer. And it was not, any different or any stipulations going with it. It was, respect her like you respect everybody else on the staff, like she's a member of our staff. And I think that was already set before I stepped into that role, and he just continued it. And it was a much easier transition probably than in other places because of him.
Yeah. I've been so impressed. I had Mike Flores on as a guest earlier, Jesse Sapolu. I think Coach's background, being a Midwest guy, going to UCLA first and then to the islands. I mean, he worked with people from all different walks of life, all different cultures. And I think he was masterful in his ability, not just to work with people from different cultures, but to draw on those strengths. And this is not a conversation you and I have ever had, but I've met your mom and I've had some of her homemade authentic cooking.
So first, I have to say that with that kind of background with Coach Tomey, I think Coach Tomey was a lover of people, right? He didn't care race, sex, age, anything. It was just he loved people and he loved interacting with people. And so he embraced cultures, he embraced language, he embraced everything. And it's funny because he one time in a staff meeting, and I can't remember the true thing of what it was, but there was somebody else in the staff meeting, so it required an introduction, and he introduced me as Maggie Garcia. And then it didn't he didn't think of anything. And then somebody it's like, hey, her last name is not Garcia. Right. So he obviously knew that I was of a Hispanic descent. So Mexican mother, Spanish father. I was born in Mexico. I came to the US at the age of 5. And he embraced that, though. It was funny. And Maggie Garcia I think she worked in a finance department at Arizona. So there was a Maggie Garcia, but he just did this. And to this day, I guarantee you, if I call Nancy, okay, Nancy Kincaid, that she would laugh and call me Maggie Garcia, because it made Coach, he was so embarrassed, but he laughed so much about it at that time, kind of just, hey, it's a culture thing. It doesn't matter. And I never took any offense to it. I thought it was hilarious. But yeah, so that's my background. Mexican mother, Spanish father, Mexican descent.
Yeah. And so with that background, I mean, we talk about pioneers and groundbreaking positions and how Sue being one of the first Division I football athletic trainers. And I don't know, I've never done the research into that depth, but I have to assume that you were a pioneer both on the ethnic side and on the gender side, where a Mexican-American woman in that role was highly unusual. I mean, in the span of my career, I've seen the percentage of certified athletic trainers flip to being predominantly female. And so these are these are stories I don't think students today would even be able to recognize, the workplaces that many of our predecessors had to endure, and whether that's sexism, whether that's racism, whatever. And it all comes from the pioneering work of people like yourself, people like Sue. But I also recognize that there's also a coach who is not just willing for that to happen, but wanted that to happen. He wanted a diverse culture. I think of the way he worked with and loved our poly players. Like, it was so culturally rich, and I didn't expect it going to Tucson. I expected the Hispanic influence in Tucson, but the poly influence with the football program in particular was remarkable. And especially seemed like our O-line, there was just, I remember ordering knee braces that had like special prints that were reflective of culture. I mean, that's what was cultivated there. What were your initial impressions of Coach Tomey when you did step into that role as a full-time staff meter, as a leader, as a person?
It was welcoming. He was welcoming from the minute it happened, right? It was, hey, you're a member of our staff. These are our staff meeting times. You're going to come to the staff meetings. He set the expectations of what I was going to do at the staff meetings, what I was going to do in terms of practice, travel, and that sort of thing. He lined out what decisions I could make as far as like who, travel, staff, that sort of thing. But otherwise, it's, hey, this is our staff. You're a part of our staff, and you're going to be a welcome member of it, an equal member of it. There was nothing ever, any way that he made it feel any different. Again, like I said, he was a people lover, and he embraced people for how they were. He didn't want to change anybody, right? And when you're working with a team, when you're working with athletics, there are people, very different personalities on one team, and how do you make all that work? And you think of the people that we all have to work with as athletic trainers, and how you approach maybe an injury or a rehab is that not everybody's the same, and you can't approach everybody the same. And Coach Tomey knew that, and that's how he approached things. We all have seen and have heard the man hugs that he gave, and the emotion and the crying, and it was special. It was very, very special, whether it was, you're a camp coach, he's working 100 hours a day to, back during the season. And it's, his welcoming of just people. I don't think he saw me any different than he saw anybody else on the staff. Is that, hey, you're a member of the staff, you have a responsibility, and we're all going to treat you equal that way. And quite frankly, the players did the same. The players were a reflection of him. Mm-hmm. There was one small incident way at the beginning. One player thought he was going to make a funny joke, and his teammates heard it, and they shut it down immediately, and it never happened again. And that was just, again, I think the reflection of him and how he set the standards for how people should be treated. Yeah. That was so. I'm tremendously grateful, because to your point of who was doing it at that time, Sue Hillman clearly opened the doors, and she was probably the first of two people to do it in the country. And there were still very, very few when I stepped into that role. But quite frankly, I tried not to think of the enormity of it at that time, because that was terrifying. Okay. If I thought about it, quite frankly, then that was terrifying. So for me, it was just, hey, I'm an athletic trainer. I have a job. I have a role. This is my responsibility, and I'm going to do it. And some people have a little bit of a different approach. I probably was let's just call it a little bit more on the stricter side than I probably would have liked to have been. And I just felt like I needed to have certain things buttoned up in order for things to be able to for me to be able to be successful and not lose sight of what I needed to do. But
absolutely. And I don't think it was fair, but I certainly saw for you, it wasn't fair that you had to do it better than a guy would have had to do it. You had to be cleaner. You really had, in that era, very little margin for error, because people, whether at Arizona, probably not, but elsewhere would gladly point to a failure of a female in that position and say, this is why we shouldn't have women in the locker room. And so there was a scrutiny with that. And there was no doubt, that was a heavy load to bear, but I always appreciated it. And I made light of it in my last episode about how kind of tough and no nonsense you were, but you had to be.
Yeah. You know, at the time I felt like I had to be, and maybe I did. I mean, looking back, I wish there's times when I wish I would have been less strict, less what have you, and had enjoyed the process more. But I was afraid of that. I was afraid of the judgment that was happening. And I don't think people did this on purpose by any means, but I remember multiple times, you travel, you go to a team and the medical staffs meet pregame in the middle of the field or on the sideline or what have you, introduce each other and what have you. Nobody, they're like, who's she? Right. Until literally one of our docs had to say, hey, this is our athletic trainer. And then they would do a double take. And because I mean, I have to think back of who we played that would have had another female across the field as well. Maybe like Dawn at UTEP.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, so other than that, it was there was a very male oriented setting. And again, I don't blame anybody. That was just the way it was. And so to have a female there, it was very unusual. And even going into hotels, checking into hotels on the road, and people thought I was like the nurse, okay? Or I was like the travel coordinator or something. They never thought I was the position that I was in. And it was, but I laughed a lot about those things because like, yeah, who was doing it? And so the fact that I was able to do it, it was a privilege to me. I'm like, you know what? This is an amazing honor and a privilege, and I best not mess it up.
Yeah. Well, you did a tremendous job. I so appreciate just the excellence in your work and the model you were for me as a professional, female or not. Just your work was exemplary. I saw student athletes would stream in and they would go straight to you. They knew where to go to get help. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Again, we're talking with Magie Lacambra, a former head football athletic trainer at the University of Arizona. We're going to switch gears a little bit. Coach Tomey was known for being a tough coach. He was no nonsense. I can remember one particular game where we underperformed. That next practice, a lot of rolling. He was not going to let his players get away with less than he thought was their best. And sometimes that can intersect with what we're trying to do as a medical staff. How did you see your role as a healthcare provider intersecting or perhaps colliding with his approach to that tough, that grit, that player development?
It's an interesting balance, right? Because I think no matter what sport you're working or who you're doing it with, that there has to be that understanding of what everybody's role is. And his role was to motivate, to educate, to coach, to discipline, to do all those things. And my role was to keep the team healthy and abide by the healthy standards. And so the one thing that, one of the many, I think agreements that we had is that he's going to coach and I'm going to do my job and we're going to communicate. And so if I ever felt that something was in danger or if it was out of, maybe alignment with the best interests of the student athlete from a safety perspective, I would share that with him. Now, when somebody's rolling and they're puking because they're rolling, that's a matter of, hey, that's consequences, right? Was it going to put somebody in jeopardy at that time? I didn't think so, but there were consequences. Now, obviously, in Tucson, there are monsoons. There are beautiful monsoons that bring a lot of lightning. And so like that, it's a player safety. It was my job to, with very different tools that they're available now, is try to see where those storms are and let coach know when it was time to vacate the field, because it was, no matter what was happening, it was a safety issue. And so he never questioned that. He never questioned whether an athlete could practice or not practice because of injury or rehab or what have you. He was interested in, hey, what's the best thing for the athlete? And we'll do what we can around it and just make sure that they're here, that we want them here, at least taking mental reps and doing what they can out here, and we'll go from there. And so it was a matter of, I think, meeting in the middle to he's doing what he needs to do. I'm doing what I need to do with the athlete, and we're moving in the same direction.
Yeah. Also, it was a different era. And certainly in your travels today, I mean, you're still actively involved. You communicate regularly, if not daily, with Power 4, D1 programs, you know what it's all about. But in that era, you could build a team over the course of years. It wasn't a portal-dominated era. This was a coach who famously would bring in walk-on guys. We've talked to Brad Brennan on this show before, Bear Baker.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a long history, Dave Phipp for that matter, of guys that didn't have a chance really anywhere else, not just coming and being a part of the team, but being critical parts of the team. And so he was known for building that culture. From your point of view, what do you think made it so unique under Coach Tomey?
He cared. He cared because, again, there are times in staff meetings that it would come up that, certain player, didn't show up for class, or they didn't do a certain thing, or they didn't go to their weight workout, or they missed their rehab appointment, whatever it was. And Coach Tomey wouldn't get mad about that. He would not. He would look at the position coach of that player and say, "Hey, coach, go find out what's going on. Find out why this is happening. Okay, we need him in the classroom. We need him at practice. We need him in the training room. We need him in the weight room. Find out what's going on." Okay, and that's a different approach, right? He wasn't going to blame first without knowing what it was. He was going to care. He was going to care first, and then take action. And it was. I don't know if how that approach would be now. And to your point, with all those young men that came there without scholarship as walk-ons or, blue chip players, what have you. And because he cared so much, they stuck around, they developed over time, they earned a scholarship later on. And yet today's environment, wow. I've often thought, literally multiple times, how would Coach Tomey do in today's environment of the portal and NIL and so forth? It would be very challenging. I'd love to think that he would have created his own mold and his own way of doing things, because he would care so much for the athlete that would supersede anything else that's going on. But you're right, that putting the time in to develop a player and literally sit down on the floor and talk to his parents and tell them how he's going to take care of them or how he's going to do various things. I mean, I had players' parents talk to me on the field at practice about, "Hey, Coach Tomey said XYZ. I was really worried about them. My son called me talking about whatever it was, and I called Coach Tomey's office and talked to him directly." So he just eased all these things, and he took the time to express care for them as young men, who then became good football players, right?
I agree.
And team members. Yeah,
absolutely. I think one of the saddest aspects of this story for me is the recognition that we are in an era where this kind of coaching becomes harder and harder to do. How can you be successful and win 9 or 10 games or lose your job by having the patience to develop a young man that shows up on your campus, a scrawny 175-pound nothing, and needs 4 or 5 years of development? There's just no time for that anymore. And
no,
I really think that as much as I would love to have this optimism that his coaching legacy can go on exactly the way it did at Arizona, I just don't think the system allows that kind of love and care for a student athlete anymore.
Yeah, no, it is. It's definitely a different setting. I mean, there's a very prominent, well-respected head strength and conditioning coach in a Power 5 school, a Power 4 school. And a few months ago we were talking, and he just said, "Maggie," he said, "this is different. It's like, this kid, we've developed him for the last 3 years. Now he just left. And this other school is going to reap the rewards of all the work that was done here to develop him. And now he's going to go play for them." And he understands it, right? He doesn't like it. And that's right. I think Coach Tomey would do the same thing. It's like, it's you put in the work, and you need to hopefully see the rewards of the work that you're putting in. And it's a very different environment now.
Yeah. Well, I showed up on campus as Arizona football was growing, and it was a good time. And I was super jealous of Aaron for getting to be that guy, but it was just good to be there during that 98 season, come off a bowl win, and then head into that 98 season, culminating with that Holiday Bowl. And I was looking at that picture just the other day, And it crossed my mind. You've got Chris McAllister hoisting the trophy, all world, everything, all NFL, like an exception in terms of how Coach Tomey was kind of known for landing these highly regarded prospects.
Huh.
So Chris McAllister. Then you've got Kelvin Efon, who showed up on campus as a
Jeez.
basketball player. And then you got Barrett, who was a walk-on. And
Yeah.
that pinnacle moment for Arizona football is so emblematic. And I'm getting choked up just thinking about how those three guys represent kind of just how vast Coach Tomey's love and care for student athletes were. Those were three guys he refused to give up on. And it led to the most successful season ever. And it still hasn't been surpassed. So talk me through that 98 season and what it was like for you to be in the inner circle.
Yeah, it was a special time. It was a special time, Toby. Just as you're choking up about it, man, it brings back so many memories for me. And as difficult of those, those times were, the memories are amazing. And those three young men that you mentioned, three very different walks of life, right? Three very different personalities, yet they were brothers on that team because Coach Tomey set that standard, because he embraced them that way, because he created that culture that, hey, you guys, we're going to be in this together, right? We're going to be in this together. And it doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is, and the resources for the athletes, I think are something to be commended as well, right? So you can't do it without having the help in the classroom or, heck, man, I think of some of these young guys and what they did back then and didn't have financial support from home, right? They're living on that loot check and they're trying to make it work. And now the difference that there is now with that, but those people, staff, players, coaches, everybody involved with it. I mean, it was a family. It was a family. And the goal of Coach Tomey it was like, it's like burn the boats. Burn the boats. We're going to do this one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. And he just said that. He says, you got to believe, right? That's another great word that Coach Tomey used a lot, but it was true. It's like, if he believes, then the players are going to believe. If he acted like it was going to be possible, then the players are going to believe it was possible. You had to set that from somewhere. And this taking that one game at a time and feeling like, hey, it's us against them. It's us against them. And even though those were, yes, very successful years for Arizona football, it was still a very basketball focused department, right? I mean, Lute Olson was doing amazing things with the men's basketball program, and it was still like a special thing that, hey, we're going to stick together. And I think also the environment of McHale Center back then, it was all athletes under one roof, right? Everybody intermingled, everybody knew each other, everybody supported each other. And so that energy of success from week to week, no matter what the sport was, it was just contagious. Yeah. And being inside the locker room and hearing the speeches and hearing the players of just what they thought from week to week, pretty priceless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had Kara Fry and Mike Meyer both on earlier, and they referred to it as McHale High, and I'd never heard it talked about that way. But there were little cliques and, athletes from different teams that would hang out. And it was really a cool vibe, just a different kind of dynamic. And I think that came from the top, where we as a staff got together, everybody kind of pulling for one another. And it was, I didn't realize how different that was until I went somewhere else and realized, it's not this way everywhere. That was really different. And that was not just different, it was really, really good. And that's what I feel like time has allowed me to kind of view this experience through. Well, 98 was an inverse of 99. Go into the season of 98 unranked, end up fourth in the country. 99, we go in ranked fourth in the country, end unranked. And famously, my missed bowl opportunities. Talk me through what 99 was like, because that ended up being your last season as a clinician working with college football. What was that season like? And what, if any, role did Coach Tomey play in counseling you as you looked at some other opportunities?
That was a rough year in more ways than one, right? Yeah. So, is that when we started at Penn State and kickoff return for 98 yards and LeVar Arrington and like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Yeah. So yeah, that was almost like looking back, it was almost like a preface of what the year was going to be like. And without knowing it, right. Without knowing it, and to nobody's fault, nothing. It just, things did not work out or pan out the way I think any of us had wanted or had planned for it to be. So it was difficult on the field. There were some challenges going on staff wise within our department as well. Let's just say there was some challenges there, and that's probably where I feel like if I have regrets, those are the regrets that I have, is how I handled that year for the team, and because the team was still working, the team was still doing what they needed to do. Right? They didn't need to hear or didn't need to see or experience what was happening to my side of things at work. And I should have done better. And that's a regret that I, if I could do that part over again, I would do that part over again, because it was challenging. But at the same time that it was challenging for me professionally from a non-football side, the football side of it was still very supportive. The athletes were very supportive. The staff was very supportive. Coach Tomey was very supportive. Hey, he pulled me in his office one day. It's like, what's going on? What can I do for you? Okay. What can I do for you? And wow. Say, wow. It's not often that you get that from a head football coach that's concerned about, an athletic trainer. I think there are people out there nowadays that do have that very tight relationship with the coaches they work with. And that is something that I will forever be grateful for Coach Tomey and that support that he had of what can I do for you? And so it was, and there for a while, Toby, I think, not only is it the stress of the job, but I was working women's basketball and football at the same time one year. And I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. Probably not the best decision I ever made to do that. And that, again, it's trying to do everything and not give up on anything, but it probably had consequences. But still, that last year, painful, but rewarding as well. And the one thing I would just take back is just how I reacted to certain things that happened to me professionally. But otherwise, Coach Tomey and the team were amazing. And you guys, that's the other one. I owe you guys all an apology as GAs and students and staff of not being able to not be more of a support, more of a mentor to you guys. I was in a little bit of a tunnel there, I would say, to keep words clean there, is that or let's just say I was in a funk. I was in a deep funk and I didn't handle it well. And that's the other part of my regret, is not having been a better mentor for you guys and teach you more of what it was. It was kind of, I felt like I was on survival mode, and I almost kind of made you guys be on survival mode as well as a consequence. And that was not fair. So I apologize for that.
Not necessary. Appreciate it, but not necessary. I can say this from my perspective, not knowing the details, but seeing, and I kind of saw this again in 2000 from a distance. I mean, I wasn't working with you day in and day out, but working adjacent to you day in and day out. Same thing was happening in 2000. I wasn't working day in and day out with that coaching staff as a GA, but I saw it, and I saw kind of the wear and tear as that season dragged on, like what it was doing, kind of the countenance of people. And this was an era where, I mean, we had Jeff Jansen as our sports performance guy, but there was no mental health care, certainly for staff, very little for student athletes. And so you're just doing your best to survive. And I want to tell you unequivocally, like I was inspired by seeing you do the job you did with the resources you had, limited as they were, I couldn't have asked for a better mentor in that circumstance. It was powerful to see you continue to do the job in the face of what you were facing, which I didn't have all the details on and didn't need them, frankly.
Well, I truly thank you. Thank you for those very kind words. Because I wish I'd have done better. I wish I'd have done better. And I truly appreciate the maturity that you all did, especially you as GAs. I mean, honestly, you guys were, and my, fellow staff that were working there at the time as well. I leaned on them a lot. I Ed and Greg and MB. I mean, they were, I cried on their shoulders a bit, right?
Yeah.
And you guys GAs, I mean, you guys kept it going. So, if I ever, in another life, if I ever go back to the training room, I will certainly do things a little bit differently in that regard. But at the same time, to your point, even when I see now in the job that I have now, and I see how staff works, how they treat their GAs, how they treat their students and so forth, there's a lot of learning from simply observing and not even necessarily being privy to everything that's happening there, but just seeing how people communicate, how they treat others. And so I wish I'd have done better then, and I hope I can do better now.
No,
So,
I certainly appreciate it. So Coach Tomey wasn't far behind. One more season of 5 and 6 football, and depending on what you read, he was either asked to leave or whatever. And I'm not really going to get into those details here. But is there a particular game or moment that stands out to you as being kind of emblematic of who Coach Tomey was as a person?
wow. That's a tough one because he was so consistent, right? He was so steady. He was, I loved his laugh. I just absolutely loved his laugh, and him telling stories, or the gatherings that he had at his house. And I remember the pregame speeches against ASU. That was really interesting because having been on the other side of that, that was just so interesting. But it was the approach was the same always. But like, I think back, our game at Washington and what has become the leap at the lake or something to that effect, right? With OJ leaping into the end zone. And quite frankly, I saw that from street level down, because I don't know if you recall, we'd had a player that had a C-spine injury. I ended up leaving the game with them, and Dr. Wong and I walked back, which I thought was crazy because we were done at the hospital, and the player we knew he was okay at that point. And I said, "Okay, Doc, how are we going to get back now to the stadium?" And he said, "What do you mean? We're going to walk. It's right across the street." So at that, I had no idea because of the intensity of keeping this athlete stable and going. So as we're coming around, because UW, the way the stadium was, like literally if you're coming into the stadium from the street, you can see it. And like, we're coming. We got to get down there. Rushed down there, literally got on the field as OJ leaped into the end zone, and just the celebration of that, and what, the message from Coach Tomey of in the locker room afterwards, like, yes, we're celebrating. This is an amazing win, but we have a brother in the hospital right now.
Yeah.
We have a brother in the hospital, and we got to think of him, and prayed. Okay. I love the fact that he was open to prayer, and that this was embraced, and we're going to embrace this win, but we're going to also pray for our brother that he's okay. And we know that he's going to be okay, but we're going to keep him in mind, So, it was just that one victory at ASU. And I think there's probably there's a famous picture of Brad Brennan sitting on the goalpost. It's like, he loved that. It's like, you guys go celebrate. Okay. Go celebrate it. This is your moment. We earned this. And so, but there were also lessons in the losses, right? There were also lessons in the losses. I mean, he could call out like specific plays, what the yardage was, what the play was, and who ran route and who missed what block. And like, he would, and he would do that after the game and just say, "Hey, player X, you got to do this in that situation." Player, so his detail and his memory for all that. But again, they were all teaching. I always felt like he was teaching. Like he wasn't scolding or yelling. Like he was teaching.
Yeah.
And hopefully the players thought that way. Maybe as a young 18, 19-year-old, you don't necessarily see it that way. But I would say that now, all these players that have had a chance to think back, that it's like, man, those were teaching moments.
Yeah.
So
that's great. I know, just thinking about it in terms of leadership, if I don't pour into people and I call them out for their bad behavior, I'm a tyrant. I'm a terrible boss. But his approach was pour into the relationships first, and then you can have that level of accountability, because people don't assume that you're attacking their character. They know you care about them. And that's a lesson for leadership that I've certainly taken from afar. I will never forget, we were in the locker room celebrating that victory, and Coach Ianello's trying to I believe he was the receivers coach at the time, trying to wrangle his guys up. And he said, "Somebody go get Brad Britton off that goalpost. Wideouts over here."
Yeah. Yeah, that's I can hear Coach I saying that right now. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. So I think it's been a long time, obviously, but as you've grown in your career and moved on to other things with Gatorade, you continue to be involved in athletics. What do you feel like are the lasting bits of Coach Tomey's legacy that have served you as you've continued to grow as a professional?
Wow. I think I always think back of how he just handled things with integrity, right? And again, of trying not to get too high or too low, of which I have an issue with. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and everybody knows what it is. And I think as I've grown in my current position now, is I've tried to learn to manage things more. And I think Coach knew that, and he would share this, is that know what you can control and do that, take care of that. When you can't control, don't worry about it, right? Because you can't control it. But if you do the things that you're supposed to do, it's almost like plan your work and work your plan, is that if you take care of those things, you're going to be in a good position. Now, sometimes the guy on the other side of the line, or the other side of the ball, he's going to be better than you. Okay. He just is. But you don't have to tell him that. You don't have to show him that. You can outwork him. You can outsmart him. You can outdo whatever it was. And so I think that was part of also his development of players, is that, yeah, you guys, there's a lot of blue chip players here. I mean, like Teddy Bruschi. I'm like, we're crying out loud. You think of these guys that they were considered marginal players everywhere else in the country, and they did such amazing things there. Everyone that you've mentioned so far, and amazing, amazing individuals. And so one of the biggest things that I take away from Coach Tomey is just how he treated people. It's like, let people be the way they're going to be. Don't change people. That's the beauty of life and the beauty of individuals, right? Is treat people how you would want to be treated. You're respectful, and just let everybody be and love each other.
Yeah. And I'm curious. I mean, he had to have gone to Hawaii with many of these philosophies, and talked to Coach Vermeil and talked to Coach Flores.
Yeah.
But I feel like Hawaii was the perfect place for him to cultivate this ohana, this family first. We are in this together. And I certainly saw evidence of that at U of A, and from the sounds of it at San Jose later in his career, when he took a San Jose State that's notoriously one of the lowest funded programs in the nation to a bowl game. That doesn't just happen. They didn't buy that. They built that.
Yeah. Again, one step at a time. And even like I see the variance of the haves and the have-nots, even now in the job that I have, with the differences of budgets of one school versus another school and what they do. And Coach Tomey was never concerned about that. It was just, hey, we're blue collar people, and we're going to work hard. We're going to outwork our opponent. We're going to outwork anybody that's across that line from us. And that's how we're going to do it. And if we believe in each other and we support each other, there's a lot that can be accomplished. And I think, he loved having his family around. Okay. He loved, obviously, Rich being right there and coming around to practice. And Nancy used to come to practice a lot, and every once in a while we'd see Lee as well. So it was just, he would have events at his house, across the street there from McHale from McHale. And he just loved having people around and embracing people. So Ohana is a perfect word for him, is that's what he believed going into it. And that's, if it's a matter of, this is how he wanted to be treated. Okay. He was going to treat others how he wanted to be treated. And that embracing of the family environment, he extended that out. He was very proud of his family. Obviously, I heard Rich talk, and I think Coach Tomey was tough on him, but he also loved him, and he wasn't afraid to be open about his love for another individual. And that's a special quality about a human and about a man, especially. And he wasn't afraid to show that. And I think that's part of it. It's like, we don't need fancy stuff. We don't need this, but you know what? Give us a ball, give us a field, give us some cleats and helmets. We're going to take care of things.
Yeah.
And I think he always just carried that out.
Yeah. I think Rich even pointed to it. He relished the role of the underdog. And I think he preferred the way it went down in 98 unranked to best season in school history, as opposed to heavy expectations and having to carry that weight. That really wasn't.
He did not like that high ranking that year. Yeah. Yep.
Any particularly funny stories about Coach Tomey that come to mind when I ask?
Oh gosh, there's so many. There's so many, and it's, again, I think of, if you just see him, it was that he wasn't worried about a fancy suit or fancy apparel. Okay, like Coach Tomey often wore dress shoes without socks and shorts. It was like he set his own tone. There may have been a time or two when you're standing at an event with a plate of food and Coach Tomey comes over and just grabs a piece of food off your plate, whatever it was, right? And that was okay, because that's who he was. That's who he was. It was just, he was that comfortable. It's like, hey, we're all family here. Let me take that celery off your plate, right? So, but it was just that, and he just loved seeing the guys have fun. And even in the most intense times, like I remember standing on the fields at Camp Cochise. This is training camp, right? Preseason training camp. Supposed to be pretty intense. You're out there it seemed like the middle of nowhere, and the monsoon would start rolling in, and he'd walk over and he's like, Maggie, look at that beautiful sky. Look how beautiful those clouds are that are coming in right now. I'm like, the first time he ever said that just really kind of caught me off guard. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is intense time, and he's really enjoying the beauty of the environment that we're in, surrounded by these clouds coming in. But he could do that, right? And then he could come right in and tell a player about what just happened with the play that was just run, or a technique in a drill that they were doing. He could switch that way. His mind was. He was pretty intense in that regard of just being able to switch around like that. So Some great times, some really, really, really good times. And man, I will be thankful to Coach Tomey for forever. And I'm just grateful that I had a chance to be on his staff and work alongside him. Yeah.
I had a chance to visit U of A, and I don't know if you've seen it. I'm sure you have, but the Coach Tomey practice fields, there's a plaque.
Yeah.
And it's surreal to me. I mean, first of all, the baseball field is gone. So that was a bit of a jolt. But the fact that this coach, who had the greatest season in school history and 2 years removed, is getting pressured out, like, that's a complicated relationship. And I love the fact that U of A has honored him. I love what Coach Brennan has done in bringing a lot of familiar faces back. But it makes me wonder, what in your opinion do you think Coach Tomey would want people to remember most about him and his teams? What would he say his legacy is?
It's such a tricky question, because I think the last thing he was worried about would be his legacy. Yet, if he had to, I would just say, again, it's just family and how he treated people, that he cared, that he was a caring human being. And it wasn't that, I mean, I think most people know that he loved baseball. I mean, he was a baseball player, right? And that's what he did in his off time, was play baseball. But he was an amazing football coach, and he knew how to build a staff, and he knew how to get the most out of his staff. He knew how to get the most out of the players. but he cared. He cared a lot. And he showed that every day. And I think just knowing the type of individual that he was, that again, didn't care about a legacy, but if you had to put a word on it, it was that he cared.
Yeah.
That he
Without a
cared.
doubt. Yeah, absolutely. Well, last one here. We're gonna play a little bit of make believe. I want you to look into the camera. We're on the Zoom call here. Pretend I'm him. You get one more chance to say whatever's on your heart. What would you say?
Oh my gosh, Coach Tomey, I thank you. I thank you for allowing me and to be a part of your team, for supporting me, for embracing the for building the culture that you built and embracing everybody that was a part of it, and just allowing us all to be individuals and allowing us each to basically be in charge of our own success. That you laid that groundwork, and I love you for it. I miss you.
Yeah. Well, so heartfelt. I sincerely appreciate you joining me today, Mags. It's been tremendous. Last little bit, I always stitch this in. If you just state your name, just introduce yourself and say, and I am undone.
I am Magie Lacambra, and I am undone.
Tremendous. I'll go ahead and stop the recording right there.